And now let's talk to Tom Farrell. Tom is building a new layout, and he's really got some fantastic backdrop scenery to show you tonight. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Yeah, so Jim has kindly invited me to do a step-by-step of my new rustic buff and old Gothic railroad. We're going to show how I put the half of the backdrops up tonight. So if we could switch to the slides here. That's a picture of my old rustic buff and old Gothic On30 railroad. Just always like to show an old photograph. My idea here is to build an even better railroad. And this is my 7th railroad, and I've been doing this for over 50 years. And I'm really trying to take my time. So that's what I mean by no compromises. Everything has an order. On my old layout, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago in a previous presentation, I jumped around a lot, from bench work to backdrops to wiring to this to that. This I'm going step by step by step, and I'm holding to my promise. So I'll be brief this evening because we're running late. We go to the next slide. My first rustic buff and old Gothic had a company called Backdrop Warehouse backdrops. They were basically photographic paper. And they were, well, the thing I liked about it is they had very nice photographs to choose from. But what I didn't like about them is they were very fragile. They were basically paper. So if you got any paint or Sculptamold or plaster on them, they damaged and they got stained. And if you wanted to touch something up with paint, it was pretty obvious. Anyway, so this time around, and once you put a backdrop up, build your layout out around it, there's no way of easily replacing it, at least on my layouts. So this time I did some research, and all these names sound similar, but I found a company called Railroad Backdrops. And these are a polypropylene material as opposed to a photographic paper. You can optionally get a peel and stick material on them, which is what I did. So I didn't have to put my own adhesive up there like on the last backdrop warehouse backdrops. So one half of my layout, the layout that I'll feature tonight, required 3 24-inch high, 144-inch long pieces. The key thing tonight is the takeaways. If you go to the expense of these backdrops, there's hopefully a learning curve I can help you with here, because even though I was very careful, I learned quite a few things on putting these up. So we go to the next slide. So for my January 4th presentation, I was very meticulous, at least I thought I was, on preparing the masonite to accept these backdrops. So you can reference this presentation, but basically I try to get it as smooth as possible. And I thought these polypropylene backdrops would be a little more forgiving than the paper backdrops. But that was one takeaway. I will do an even better job on the second half of this layout. So if you look at that photograph in the upper left, I did the right-hand side of my layout with the 344-inch pieces. The left-hand side will require 4 144-inch long pieces. It's 45 feet in length, and what I'm going to show you tonight is 35 feet. One of the takeaways is you really have to be sensitive to any little bumps or any little seams if you don't want to see them on your backdrop. So let's go to the next slide. So just for giggles, I taped up the first mock-up to see what things would look like. And I took one of my scratch-built models named after a couple of my favorite 2 modelers. And I just wanted to see if the perspective was there. It seems to work. I just lost the PowerPoint. Phil, are we, is the PowerPoint still there or what? Hello, Jim? Is the,
Is Phil still here?
I can do a share screen. I have it up.
He should be. I don't know where he went.
He said that he was going to.
There
do
it is. There it is. There
Okay.
it is.
Sorry. Okay. So here we are. So I just took one of my dioramas, if you will. All my buildings are built on either foam. Actually, the only one built on foam is this one. The others are all built on plywood. And I just put it up there to see what things would look like straight on. I think it looks pretty acceptable. Okay, so next slide. These things were so long, 144 inches. I built a temporary workstation in the garage. I took a 4x8 sheet of foam, put it on my table saw with a something to hold up one end of the other end of that foam, put a piece of plywood on there, and to trim these things up. They're they're printed and they have a 1/4 inch white perimeter around them. I wanted that top 1/4 inch removed. You can see on the very right photo, I've got a metal yardstick there and a fresh X-Acto blade in my knife, and then some painter's tape to hold everything in place. So I trimmed the top right off, which was a simple thing to do on my temporary workbench. Okay. Next slide. I took a piece of scrap material, and you have an option to just take this plastic film off the back of the backdrop and simply use the adhesive that's on there and just stick it right on your masonite. Or you can spray the back of the backdrop with water and mist it, and that gives you more working time. I found that with my masonite, since I triple painted it with a oil-based primer, I found at the end of it, when I was all done, I didn't really need the water, and I won't use the water next time. And even though we'll get to when you put the backdrop up and you try and squeegee that water out, you don't get it all. And the next morning you find little bubbles that I'm still working on trying to get out. So next time I'm just going to do it dry. But I did find if you stick this material to a unprimed, unsealed masonite, you only get it sticks so much that you only get one shot. And if you try to pull it off, you won't have any adhesive. You'll have masonite on your hands. So we'll go to the takeaways at the very end, but let's go to the next slide. So there's the first 144 inch long, 24 inch high piece that I put up. I think it looks pretty neat. And then we'll go to the next slide. There's looking at the other direction. I should point out, if you look about 1/3 of the way down the on this photograph, and you see that like white snow-capped mountain, and then there's glaciers. So you see the glaciers and then look at 12 o'clock. I didn't really like that snow cap on there. I painted it out, which I'll have to show at some later date, but I was successful in painting out some of the things I didn't like on this on these backdrops. But I mean, they look perfectly acceptable. I just thought it was too white. Anyway, go to the next slide. That's backdrop number 2. I would defy anybody to see the seams on these that I put in. I really effectively nailed the seams. You can't see them. And a little trick is when you do, I mean, you have to cut them parallel and perpendicular because they do have white, they do require trimming on both ends. So not only did I trim the 1/4 inch off the top, I had to trim the ends because they were white as well. But so long as you're perfectly square, when you match these backdrops up, they mate very well. The trick is you go back with some acrylic paint in the case, and you hit that seam, you rub paint on the seam because you'll see the edge, a little edge. But when you do that with acrylic paint matching, say, these pine trees, I mean, it just disappears right before your eyes. Same with the blue. I chose a overcast skies, but with just a little blue and gray paint on that seam. And they just, I mean, it's like magic. They just go away. Just a little tip there. Okay, and the next slide. And this is the third and final piece. I reshaped that mountain that you see that one that's about 2/3 of the way back. It looks like I shaped that a little differently with paint. Fortunately, I'm somewhat of an artist, so you can't really tell, but it's a little more attractive shape in my point of view. And again, there's a seam in there, and you can't see it. You really can't. Okay, next slide. Now, the key takeaways, this polypropylene material is definitely superior to the photographic paper. It doesn't crease very, it's when you're working this, it's like working with a bag of snakes. You don't know whether to let go or hold on. This is not an easy thing to do. I just did it single-handedly with no assistance. But if you work with the paper, it creases and you see the folds. This is much more, you'd really have to do something to damage this polypropylene. The self-adhesive is better than applying your own. The paper one before, you can hang it with Velcro. You can hang it with spray adhesive. You can hang it with wallpaper paste. This, you don't have to do any of that. It's just you peel off a piece of thin plastic and you've got your self-adhesive. You got to be careful. Everything's parallel and perpendicular, but it rolls right on. And even though I say I was maniacal on the surface preparation, I'll do a better job on the other side. These things are extremely expensive. I guess I should mention the costs just so you know what you're dealing with. This side alone was $870. The other side is going to push $1,000. So the real key takeaway is you don't necessarily need water. You'll get bubbles. Now, no matter how careful you are squeezing that water out of there. And if you're not going to use water, you better triple coat it with a oil-based primer. You can't, if you use a latex, it'll lift. But if you use a durable primer, oil-based, you can get away with, even while you're rolling this out and placing it on, if you don't press it immediately onto the backdrop, you can peel it off a little bit and adjust it. They do tend to, you got to be careful they don't walk. They don't, as you're rolling it out, it can go up or down. I'll take some questions on this if anybody has any, but yeah.
Yeah, Tom, you said that you do even more in your preparation next time. What did you find lacking that you had done? Because it looks like you had done more than probably anybody else would have anyway.
Oh, if I look behind me at this thing, which you can't, well, I have a photograph of my old railroad, but I can see a couple bumps from the I didn't get it perfectly smooth in areas, and I got one seam that I'm going to a seam on the masonite that's showing through the even though I was careful, I guess I missed it. I'm going to put a mountain there so you won't see it. But it just has to be absolutely perfect, or you're going to see this show through the polypropylene. My assumption was the polypropylene would be more forgiving than the photographic paper. I was wrong.
What's the thickness of
Yeah,
the
I was
media?
gonna say thickness of it.
It's thin. It's like a, let me just, like a
Okay.
010, something like that, 010 material. It's really thin material, but it conforms to every little bump and things. I mean, I did a pretty fair job of preparing it if you saw my January 4th presentation, but I'm going to go back and rework the other side because, you know, we're talking about $2,000 here.
Well, you were talking about with the water where you get some little bubbles. Can you prick those and work them out like with a car wrap or something?
Yeah, I have pricked them with an X-Acto
Okay.
knife. I just slice and push them out. But
Mhm.
there's where water built up, it looks like it's soaked through the back of this. I don't know how the hell you could get soaked through on polypropylene, but it seemed to have weakened the material,
Uh-huh.
which is weird. I mean, that's truly weird. It's a plastic material. So I'm just going to do it dry next time. And it's going to be, if I have to spend another week or two massaging that other side, it's going to be even better, you know?
And any thoughts of having a helper?
Well, I thought if I had my wife here, we'd get divorced. I've called this backdrop so many different names, it's holy now. It's,
Thanks.
yeah.
So Tom, I've seen this, your work and process. It's amazing. I just did 24 feet of this on a modular layout that I'm building, and it's no joke, but it's amazing when it's done. Like I can echo his comments. It's beautiful, but it's, you know, like it's a little stressful, right? You know, you're putting up 24 feet, $750 worth of stuff, and you're like, I got one shot at this. It's a little sketchy. It's, you know, it's stressful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my son helped me, but we did it dry, so it was a one-shot deal. And you know, almost I just was kind of like, I felt like we got lucky because we had a few little things, but it came out pretty good. But man, the 3M paper, like to your point, it looks freaking amazing. I mean, it's the best looking backdrops I've ever seen, right?
Yeah,
Quality-wise, I mean, they're just beautiful. And once you get a layout in front of them, you know what I mean? Like, you know, all that stuff will, you know, kind of probably vanish anyway, but they really, you know, did you get them from aerobackdrops.com as well, or someone else?
I got it from, it's on the beginning of the presentation. I can never remember the name of them because they're so similar.
There's railroad backdrops.
Railroad backdrops, yeah.
Yeah, that's who I got mine from, but really good quality. I mean,
Yeah, they're excellent quality, and there were a couple things I didn't like on the glacier, you know, a snow-capped mountain I painted out, and I painted it with acrylic. Then I hit it with Tester's flat dull coat, and you can't see that I painted it. And
yeah, congratulations. It's beautiful though. I mean, it's just amazing work.
thank you. And and that's the real stress. You know, you're working with such, it's a one-shot deal. You got to be really careful. And I guess it's the least favorite part of the hobby for me, is putting these things up, you know, but it makes the biggest impact, you know. That's why I went to the expense, because, you know, if you saw my old Rustic Buff and old Gothic, it had nice backdrops, but they were paper, and over time, you know, if you bump into it, they tear and they stain, so you know, I wanted to switch, and I'm happy I did. But again, the takeaways are, if you can do it dry, because the water creates problems itself. If you want the ability to readjust, triple paint it with an oil-based primer, you can peel it off. If you don't peel it off, if you just put it on masonite, you're going to get little fuzzies. You're going to pull the masonite right off the wall, and you don't get an adjustment. And yeah, be careful it doesn't walk up or down. You know, that's the key, you know. Oh, and the seams. If you get a seam, go back with matching paint with your finger and just go over that seam. Disappears like magic. neat little trick. Yeah. And you use, yeah, that's about it, I guess, really. Yeah. Next time, if everybody wants to hear, next time will be my Digitrax DCC installation. The wiring looks very similar to a nuclear submarine. I swear to God, there's a lot of wires, but it's basically done. So.
Just the first time you've ever tried this backdrop?
This type of backdrop, yeah. I used
Yeah.
like I said, shorter, maybe 5-foot pieces or 4-foot pieces from Backdrop Warehouse, which are paper.
Yeah.
And I hung one of them with Velcro. You get little waves and things, and it wasn't satisfactory. So
Yeah.
the second half of this will even this. I mean, it looks spectacular. It's behind me, not my quarry here, but it looks really nice. It's just it's a learning curve. I thought it would go smoother than it did, but it was a bit stressful.
Yeah. Particularly if you got a one shot to make it perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to do it 3 pieces. And I was concerned with the seams, but the seams are the least of my problem.
Yeah. Anybody have any other questions for Tom? Tom, thanks so very much. I really do appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.